In previous lessons, I created a bunch of different frames that I'm going to animate. These are all individual layers and a PSD that I'm going to bring into Premiere Pro. I want to import these as individual layers, and I'll make sure to check all those layers so that I bring them all in. And these are the individual frames of my animation. I'll toggle open this folder and I'll drag in the background and put that on the bottommost layer. Then I'll bring in each of the frames and I'll make sure that those are on top of the background. I'll just stack them up like this. I'll drag a selection to select those layers, and I'm going to go ahead and set them to the frame size. Now essentially all we need to do is just have one frame play after the next in their proper sequence, and then we'll have our animation. But we may want those frames to be shorter or longer depending on how we want to blend each frame together. So I'll go ahead and just stack them all back up again. Then I'll be able to make them all equally shorter and just line them up again. I'll preview my animation and see how it's looking. Still a little bit jumpy, so I may want to adjust those frames so they're not all equal. I'll make some of the middle frames a bit shorter. And if I play the animation again, it's a little bit better. So you may have to experiment like I'm doing here to find a transition that works well for your piece. Now there are a few different ways you can blend your frames. One is you can use a crossfade. I'm going to use Film Dissolve. If I right click and set it as the default effect, then I can select all those layers and hit Control D to apply it to all of them. I'll select the ones on the beginning and end and just delete those. Now we can preview our transition. And just like before, I'll experiment with different frame lengths and transition lengths until I get something that I'm a little more happy with. It really does take experimenting to be able to get an idea for what you like and what you don't like. So as you can see, I'm trying a lot of different combinations here. All I'm doing is adjusting the length of the frames and the length of the transitions. Now I want this animation to last about 10 seconds, so I'm going to cut it off at about 5 seconds. Then I'm going to select the animation frames, right-click on them and nest them, and then I'm going to duplicate that nest. I'll right-click on the duplicate nest, and I'll hit Ctrl-R, and I'll reverse the speed. That will make the end of the animation go the opposite direction, so it'll kind of cycle back and forth. I think I'm pretty happy with how the transition looks after previewing it. So what I want to do now is get rid of this black background. I made this painting to fit a frame size, but it doesn't necessarily fit the square that I want it to fit here. So I may want to adjust it a bit. If enlarging it to fill the empty space doesn't work, then I can always duplicate the background. Then I can scale the background larger, dim it a little bit by making it less opaque. This is why it's good to keep all your layers separate from your background. I think that looks good, so one thing I want to do is add a little bit of an effect to that background. I'm going to choose a distortion effect called Wave Warp. I'll add it to the background. I'll increase the wave height and the wave width until I get something I like. And then if I preview my animation, you can see that wave moving in the background, which just makes the background look a little bit more interesting. Once you're finished with your animation, you can export or render it. I hit Ctrl M to do that. That brings up the export settings, and I can choose H.264 for my format, and then whichever other settings you like. And there you go, we have a really cool werewolf transformation that we created using Corel Painter, Photoshop, and Premiere Pro.